Lightning round, question 1. This man painted a portrait of August Strindberg as well as one of himself with a skeleton arm. Some of his other works include The Dance of Life and Death in the Sick Room, and many of his works appear in his Frieze of Life series. For 10 points, name this Norwegian artist of The Scream. The answer is Edvard Munch. Question 2. This author of The Wings of the Dove wrote a novel about Isabel Archer who marries Gilbert Osmond, and a novella that sees the ghost of Peter Quint and Miss Jezzel haunt Miles and Flora. For 10 points, name this author of The Portrait of a Lady and The Turn of the Screw. The answer is Henry James. Question 3. This psychologist was actually primarily a physiologist who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 1904, but is more well known for his work with classical conditioning. For 10 points, name this Russian psychologist who conditioned dogs to salivate in response to a stimulus while being fed. The answer is Ivan Pavlov. Question 4. A calcium carbonate skeleton known as a stereom appears in members of this phylum that possess a water vascular system. For 10 points, name this phylum with pentaradial symmetry that contains sea cucumbers, starfish, and sea urchins, which has a name meaning spiny skin. The answer is echinoderm. Question 5. This leader decided to continue a war between his country and Iraq, which led to a drastic decline in economy, and he issued a fatwa on Salman Rushdie. For 10 points, name this leader who supported the taking of American hostages, who is also a religious leader of Iran. The answer is the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini. Question 6. This figure retrieved the bones of the dead from Mictlan, became the planet Venus, and was the twin brother of Xolotl. For 10 points, name this deity of the Aztecs, who was the creator god and is recognizable as the feathered serpent. The answer is Quetzalcoatl. Question 7. Gaussian elimination reduces these entities into reduced row echelon form, and the determinant can only be found on square ones. For 10 points, name these mathematical objects that consist of a rectangular array of symbols, expressions, or numbers. The answer is a matrix. Question 8. This author's last novel was about the life of Frederick Moreau during the Revolution of 1848 and is entitled Sentimental Education. For 10 points, who is this author who famously wrote of the adulterous affair of Emma in the work Madame Bovary? The answer is Gustave Flaubert. Question 9. First convened by Pope Paul III, this body reaffirmed the practice of indulgences and veneration of saints and relics. For 10 points, name this ecumenical council of the Roman Catholic Church that denounced Protestantism and started the Counter-Reformation. The answer is the Council of Trent. Question 10. This man's presidency included the Caroline and Amistad affairs and the Arstook War. For 10 points, name this president who lost the log cabin and hard cider campaign to William Henry Harrison and who largely inherited problems such as the Trail of Tears and the Panic of 1837 from his predecessor Andrew Jackson. The answer is Martin Van Buren. Tossup and Bonus Round. Question 1. The first title of this poem was taken from Charles Dickens's Our Mutual Friend, stemming from a quote by Betty Hidgen about her adopted foundling son, Sloppy. In the version of this poem, its poet brought back from Switzerland, that title, He Do the Police in Different Voices, named this poem's first two sections. Those sections became known as The Burial of the Dead and A Game of Chess, and a different section of this poem is titled The Fire Sermon. Quotes from this poem include the mantra in the Sanskrit language, Shanti, 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 and its first line stating, April is the cruelest month. For 10 points, name this 434-line modernist poem published in 1922 by Thomas Stearns Eliot. The answer is The Wasteland. For 5 extra points, name this Eliot dramatic monologue that describes the speaker's distaste for women who come and go talking of Michelangelo, whose titular character could be connected to Raskolnikov in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The answer is The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Question 2. According to Hinduism, this object was the cup from which the gods drank Soma, which identified Soma with the god Chandra. Mesopotamian myth tells of a male deity of this object who is named Sin, and in Finnish myth, Ku was the goddess of it. Aya was an early Egyptian deity of this object, which later became an aspect of both Khonsu and Thoth. And the Aztecs believed that it was the severed head of the goddess Shoki. In Greek mythology, the daughter of the Titans, Thea and Hyperion, was the goddess of this object. For 10 points, name this object that Selene was goddess of, whose Roman equivalent was Luna. The answer is the moon. And for 5 extra points, name this object that is sometimes believed to counter the moon, the object that Helios was the personification of. The answer is the sun. Question 3. This artist made a two-sided sketch with one side depicting his two monsters while the other shows his study of monsters. He painted one piece that features a man with a funnel on his head, removing a flower bulb from another man's head in The Cure of Folly. His allegory of gluttony and lust included the Ship of Fools, and he also painted a piece typically referred to as the Path of Life, which is more well known as his 1510 The Haywain. In his most famous work, he depicted Hell, Paradise, and Eden with three-headed lizards and bird monsters. For 10 points, name this Dutch master of the triptych, The Garden of Earthly Delights. The answer is Hieronymus Bosch. And for 5 extra points, name this artist who also painted The Haywain, which depicts Willie Lott's cottage near Flatford Mill. The answer is John Constable. Question 4. The cryo-EDM is an experiment located at the Institut Langevin, aiming to measure the electric dipole moment of this particle. Based on observations of the disintegration of beryllium-14, this particle is believed to be stable in clusters of 4. The process decay for these particles involves the production of an electron antineutrino and electron by the way of a W- boson. That process is known as beta decay. These particles are fired to cause fission and then released to sustain that chain reaction. Discovered by James Chadwick in 1932, this type of baryon determines isotope. For 10 points, name these hadrons that are heavier than protons and have no charge. The answer is neutron. For 5 extra points, neutrons are made up of 2 down and 1 up varieties of what particles that are fundamental constituents of matter? The answer is quark. Question 5. This man joined the Fair Post against the newly formed Brazilian nation. This man refused to accept an offer made by Abraham Lincoln to make this man a major general in the American Civil War because he wanted the war's objective to be the abolition of slavery. This man fought in the Franco-Prussian War on the side of the Third French Republic, and this man won battles at Calatafimi, Milazzo, and Palermo while leading the Expedition of the Thousand in conquest over the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. For 10 points, name this leader of the Risorgimento, or Italian unification, who led the Red Shirts. The answer is Giuseppe Garibaldi. For 5 extra points, Garibaldi disliked this man, who was also a leader of the Italian unification, who founded the Italian Liberal Party and was Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia. The answer is Camillo Count Cavour. Question 6. This building is home to the Comnenus and Deisis mosaics. During the Iconoclasm, Leo the Isaurian issued an edict that caused all religious paintings and statues to be removed from this building. This church, ordered by Theodosius II, was burned down due to a riot known as the Nika Revolt, and the rebuilding was designed by Isidore of Miletus and Euthymius of Tralles. However, a mihrab, a minbar, and some minarets were added thereafter when this structure was turned into a mosque. For 10 points, what is this building that was commissioned by Justinian I and was known as the Church of Holy Wisdom of Constantinople? The answer is the Hagia Sophia. For 5 extra points, 2 colossal candles were placed on both sides of the mihrab by this son of Selim I, who had taken them from the Hungarians after defeating them in the Battle of Mohacs. The answer is Suleiman the Magnificent. Question 7. One character in this play has cryptic lines such as, "I am not what I am," when he repeatedly tells another character to put money in thy purse. Emilia steals a handkerchief, which is used as proof of an affair between Barbancio's daughter and the lover of Bianca. The title character is warned that jealousy is the green-eyed monster before he smothers his wife in her bed for sleeping with Michel Cassio. For 10 points, name this play where the title Moor of Venice is tricked into killing Desdemona by the deceitful Iago, a work of William Shakespeare. The answer is Othello. For 5 extra points, name the Italian composer who wrote operas such as Otello and Falstaff, which were based on plays by William Shakespeare, as well as Rigoletto and Aida. The answer is Giuseppe Verdi. Question 8. The only aldol condensation reaction to occur within this process involves the creation of citrate and is the first step. Oxaloacetate is involved in the first step and last step when it is produced from almalate, which is itself produced from fumarate. This process transforms FAD plus into FADH2 and produces 2 CO2 and 3 NADH molecules. This process begins with 2 pyruvate molecules being transformed into acetyl-CoA and produces 1 ATP. Occurring within the matrix of the mitochondria. For 10 points, name the second stage of cellular respiration that comes before the electron transport chain that is also known as the citric acid cycle. The answer is the Krebs cycle. And for 5 extra points, name the first stage of cellular respiration that converts glucose into pyruvate to be used in Krebs cycle. The answer is glycolysis. Question 9. After a 1973 coup in this country, the caravan of death flew from prison to prison in a Puma helicopter, carrying out a total of 97 executions. José de San Martin and Bernardo O'Higgins crossed the Andes into this nation from Mendoza, eventually defeating the Royalists at the Battle of Mapui, leading to this nation's independence. In this nation, Augusto Pinochet deposed the first democratically elected Marxist in the Americas, Salvador Allende. This nation fought the War of the Pacific against Peru and Bolivia, gaining possession of the Atacama Desert. For 10 points, name the South American nation, the home of poet Pablo Neruda, with a capital of Santiago. The answer is Chile. For 5 extra points, Chile is one of 2 countries in South America that do not border Brazil. Name the other country that does not border Brazil, which also owns the Galapagos Islands and has its capital at Quito. The answer is Ecuador. Question 10. Only one of the cases combined in this Supreme Court case originated from student protest, the Davis case from Prince Edward County, Virginia. Another of the cases from Delaware was the only one in which the district court judge had ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. The namesake case was unique in that there was no question in the equality of the schools. All of the 5 cases heard by Chief Justice Warren under this name were defended by future Justice Thurgood Marshall, the NAACP's chief counsel. For 10 points, name this 1954 Supreme Court decision that ruled that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. The answer is Brown v. Board of Education. And for 5 extra points, name the Supreme Court case that Brown v. Board of Education overturned, which created the separate but equal doctrine. Answer is Plessy v. Ferguson. Supertossups. Question 1. This artist made an etching that depicts a man impaled on a tree at 2 points called This Is Worse. Another etching by this artist is called The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. That work appears in a set of 80 aquatint prints that spoke out against superstition and irrationality in his Los Capricos. He painted both nude and clothed versions of Maha, as well as a work depicting an uprising that is called The Charge of the Mamluks. A series of works, which includes Fight with Cudgels and Witch's Sabbath, known as his black paintings, includes Saturn devouring his son. Another of his series depicts the violence of the 2 de Mayo uprising, and his most famous painting features a man in a white shirt with his arms raised about to be shot by French soldiers. For 10 points, name the Spanish painter of the disasters of war and the 3rd of May, 1808. The answer is Francisco Goya. Question 2. This composer wrote the incidental music to a Johann Wolfgang von Goethe play entitled Egmont. He used lyrics written by Alexander Ballantyne, William Smith, and Robert Burns for his 25 Scottish songs, and this composer's Symphony No. 7, in A major, was called the Apotheosis of Dance by Richard Wagner. His violin sonata No. 10 is known as the Cockcrow, while his 9th violin sonata is known as the Kreutzer Sonata. This man composed Bagatelle in A minor, which is more well known as his For Elise. He originally dedicated his Eroica Symphony to Napoleon, and his 9th symphony used words from Friedrich Schiller's poem Ode to Joy. For 10 points, name this composer of the Choral Symphony and also Moonlight Sonata. Question 3. This man wrote a work about a character who meets such characters as the clod of clay and the lily of the valley in the Book of the Tell. He wrote an epic poem about an earlier poet whose preface begins, "And did those feet in ancient time," and is entitled Milton, a Poem. This poet and artist wrote the lines, "I wandered through each chartered street" in the poem London, and he wrote of a character who, in an earlier poem, dreamed of an angel freeing men from a black coffin, and later cries, "Weep, weep," in notes of woe. This author of The Chimney Sweeper asks the titular animal of another poem, "Who made thee?" and another asks, "What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" For 10 points, name this poet of the Songs of Innocence and Experience, who wrote The Lamb and the Tiger. The answer is William Blake. Question 4. The Plateau Rayleigh instability is a direct consequence of the effects of this property. One of the ways to measure this property uses Langmuir-Blodgett and is known as the Wilhelmy plate, while another is known as the Denouille ring method. The prediction of this property at all temperatures is given by the Eötvös rule, and the mass transfer along a boundary between fluids due to the gradient of this measure is known as the Gibbs-Marangoni effect. This measure describes the capillary pressure when multiplied by the mean curvature in the Young-Laplace equation. Surfactants are compounds that decrease this property, an example of which is soap, leading to capillary action. For 10 points, name this property of liquids that resists an external force, which is exemplified by an insect walking on water. The answer is surface tension. Question 5. This god had an affair with Alope, the daughter of Cercyon, and begot the hero Hippothune. This god also fathered Nauplius after saving Amymone, and after he raped Caeneus, he changed her into a male warrior. This figure was raised by Telchines on Rhodes, and was nursed by Arn. His chariot is pulled by Hippocampus, and he sent a monster to attack King Laomedon of Troy after he was not rewarded for building the city walls. This god, who fathered Theseus, also fathered Chrysaor and Pegasus with Medusa. His son, who was blinded by Odysseus, was the Cyclops Polyphemus, and his consort was the nymph Amphitrite, with whom he fathered Triton. This god was also responsible for earthquakes when he struck the ground with his trident. For 10 points, name this Greek god of the sea. The answer is Poseidon. Question 6. One class of this phylum produces a planula larva that develops into a sessile polyp called a Scyphostoma. Along with the class Scyphozoa, there are 2 other classes that both are debated to not be part of this phylum, Myxozoa and Polypodiozoa. This phylum has a unique venomous cell called a nematocyte, and their bodies consist of 2 layers of epithelium and the jelly-like mesoglea that separates the layers. Species in this phylum can come together to form a colony, called a zooid, the most famous of which is the man of war. Species in this phylum go through 2 main life stages, the mobile, bell-like medusa stage and the sessile polyp. For 10 points, what is this phylum that includes hydras, sea anemones, corals, and jellyfish? The answer is Cnidaria. Question 7. One of this author's novels is about a man who wanders about in medieval Germany after leaving a monastery with the help of the first title character, Narcissus and Goldmund. Another work by this author sees Hans Gibbernath drowned after leaving the Maulbronn Seminary. This author of Beneath the Wheel wrote a novel about a member of the Castilian order who eventually gains the title Magister Ludi. That character is Joseph Knecht, who appears in this author's The Glass Bead Game. One work by this author ends when Hermine is stabbed by Harry Haller, the titular character who descends into madness, and another features the monk Govinda and the riverman Vasudeva. For 10 points, name this German author of Steppenwolf and Siddhartha. The answer is Hermann Hesse. Question 8. In the city, Vasilyevsky Island is joined with the mainland by the Palace Bridge, which connects to a famous square that features the Alexander Column. This city is known as the Northern Palmyra because of the many canals throughout the city, built on the Never River Delta. The Road of Life was used to bring supplies into the city over the frozen Lake Lagoda during its 872-day siege, and this city's Senate Square was the location of an 1825 uprising after Konstantin Pavlovich removed himself from the line of succession, which is known as the Decembrist Revolt. A 1905 event in this city saw the Imperial Guard of Tsar Nicholas II fire on protesters at the Winter Palace, which is known as the Bloody Sunday. For 10 points, what is this window on the west that served as the capital of Russia from 1732 to 1918 and was named for its founder, Peter the Great? The answer is St. Petersburg. Question 9. Esther Tellin criticized this thinker over his A not B error phenomenon and advised the dynamic systems theory approach in place of using his theory. According to this psychologist, equilibration is the highest form of development because it encompasses both assimilation and accommodation, which define his theory of genetic epistemology. That theory built on another of his concepts of a construct that is a mental framework created as people interact with the world. That construct can be behavioral, symbolic, or operational, and is called a schema. This psychologist also developed stages of development that include sensoromotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. For 10 points, name the Swiss psychologist who claimed object permanence was crucial to infants and devised the cognitive theory of development in children. The answer is Jean Piaget. And question 10. One version of this algorithm can start at either the last or the most significant digit and is called radix. The most ineffective variety of this process relies on randomness, which causes its worst case to be infinity and is called BOGO. Another of these algorithms swaps larger numbers for smaller ones, and in its best case will only take 2 in time. That typically ineffective variety has been modified by the shell and comb varieties, and one variety uses a data structure called a heap, which is a special type of binary tree. One of the most effective of these was developed by Hoare and relies on a partition operation involving an element called a pivot, and it operates in big O of n log n time. Coming in bubble, merge, bucket, and quick varieties, for 10 points, what type of algorithm that puts elements of a list in a certain order? The answer is sort.